Two levels of separation of powers. The arguments advanced by various capitalist thinkers indicated that Europe and all nations that sought to develop needed to limit the powers of the ruling elite in order to guarantee the rights of the ordinary citizens. This was encapsulated in a doctrine attributed to Sir John Acton, 1837 to 1869, who said, "Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely." When a king or monarch has power that is not limited in any way or form, that monarch is not answerable to anyone. As such, they can demand anything from their citizens. Therefore, the first step towards the building of an ideal society is to apply the doctrine of separation of powers. This is the best way to ensure that the power and authority at the top of the nation's power structures are limited, and there are checks and balances. This gives room for the political doctrine of the separation of powers, which was marked with a written constitution after the American Revolution of 1776, which led to the division of political power into three independent arms of government. Number 1, the executive. Number 2, legislature. And number 3, judiciary. The executive is to be held by the head of state, which could be a president or king or prime minister, who runs the day-to-day affairs of the state and gives final approval to laws made by the legislature. The lawmaking powers should be handed to an elected legislature to ensure that the laws represent the greatest will of the people. The third arm of government is the judiciary, which is a system of courts that are charged to apply the laws made by the legislature and granted assent by the executive. This constitutes the political notion of the separation of powers. The political separation of powers is the first step towards limiting the power of the patria, or unfettered and unlimited sovereign of a state. This way, the state is assured that the management of state affairs, lawmaking functions, and law interpretation functions are held by separate arms of government that are independent. In spite of the good intentions inherent in the political separation of powers, it is not good enough. This is because the people within the three arms of government can always collude and centralize powers among themselves. What if the head of the executive, most members of the legislature and judiciary are of the same class or background? The government is most likely to be run for the best interests of the class that is excessively represented in government. There could also be oligopolies, which would be the running and use of state resources to satisfy a small group of elites. Political separation of powers is a means to an end, the total liberation of the citizens. If political separation of powers does not give way to the economic liberation of the masses or suppression of some elements of the masses, freedom can be limited. In the 1930s, Germany came under the dominance of the National Socialist Party, which hijacked the entire political structure which was built on the doctrine of the political separation of powers. With time, one man, Adolf Hitler, eroded the political power of the different arms of government and arrogated so much power that he used to cause damage to everyone else, and above all, the German people. After Hitler was overthrown, Germany was slapped with a huge reparation for starting the war, and they had to pay for many generations until the year 2010, which was 65 years after the war. All this happened because one man managed to override the independence of the different arms of government of his country and cause damage in the name of the citizens. Political separation of powers is never good enough. It is actually the beginning of the beginning. Capitalist political thought, therefore, argues that the second stage of the separation of powers in a true democracy is the creation of free markets with no government interference. According to scholars like Ludwig von Mises, the free markets create the only reliable counterbalance to the political sphere. The free market is the agglomeration of private capital, which leads to the creation of a strong private sector, which will trade to provide the citizens a better quality of life. Since it is free and open, all citizens, including minorities, can trade and gain capital that they can use to influence the system. Imagine if the millions of minorities deported into concentration camps and killed had capital in Nazi Germany. They could have simply sold their assets and left Germany if they were threatened. However, the centralization of all powers in Germany's government allowed one man to arrogate power and control everything, including the minds of millions of Germans, that led to a genocide and the most damaging war in human history. Thus, the second stage of the separation of powers in democracy is the separation between the public sector and private sector. This is the creation of two spheres for political power and economic powers, which can be wielded and utilized where necessary.